Hey everybody, this is the TFT Fates patch rundown for 1021. If you're wondering why I'm pre-recording these, it's so we can actually localize them and let other regions benefit from this as well. So if you don't like pre-recording, sorry about that, but it's to let more players enjoy this rundown. So with patch 1021, we are at, we've gone through two patches now of Fates, and we're starting to get to the point where people are figuring out what works, what doesn't, the strong units that you want to get, whether it be Kane, Riven, things like that, or, the weaker units that you want to avoid, the weaker traits you want to avoid. And so it's about time for a bigger patch to try to boost up some of the things that people are ignoring, maybe push down a little bit the things people are latching onto, and try to get everything in that middle ground where everything works and it's a much more diverse meta. So let's jump into that and see what kind of changes we have in store. So the first one, pretty controversial one right off the bat. We've removed the change to the shop that prevented unbought champions from repeating in consecutive shops. This was a change that had some positives. It definitely made it so that you didn't have to deal as much with like weird shops being consecutive and seeing things that you didn't want again. But it also had some unintended side effects, which included, more 3 stars, things like that. But the biggest thing that caused us to remove this from the game was that it created a player behavior because of an invisible rule. Most players don't necessarily know this rule exists, but those that do begin to play in a different way, especially in the early game, but really throughout the game. And kind of like the old selling on carousel rule, we don't like it when like blind knowledge is allowing you to do things like that. And so we'd rather the game be a bit more natural and work the way you'd expect it to. And so to that end, combined with the other pros we talked about, we are removing this change. So hopefully just expect that. And hopefully it should just lead to a more natural shop experience. Next up, let's talk about the Chosen. So Chosen is a really fun mechanic. It's done really positive things for the game. We're really excited where this is landing. But it wasn't perfect. Definitely had some issues. And so we're fixing 2 of the big issues this patch. The first one is that we've modified Chosen appearance rates to reduce some of the worst case luck and streakiness. So hypothetically, the odds were astronomical, but you could re-roll 30, 40 times in a row and never see a Chosen. It is possible for that to happen. So we've removed that. We've made that much less streaky, a little bit controlled random, so that that doesn't occur. The other big one is that it was possible that one player might see 3 Chosen in the early game, and another player might not see a Chosen till like 2-5. So now we're at least guaranteeing you 1 Chosen by 2-2 before the first carousel. So you have an opportunity to take that and use that to establish a direction, pick an item off the carousel and go from there. Or you can skip it if you want, but at least we can say you got offered a Chosen. So hopefully this improves the system a little bit more and leads to a little bit more fair feeling game. So, all right, let's talk about balance on the traits. These are some of the bigger changes. Actually, Fortune's not that big, but okay, Cultist. Cultist was in this weird state where you'd hit a break point, whether it be throw in 3 1-star cultists very early, or hell, 6 1-star cultists or 5 1-star cultists in a Chosen, and you just get this massive power spike. But as the game went on, that power spike would fall off and end up being quite bad, actually. And so by the end of the game, cultists were just kind of awful. But early game cultists were way too big a spike. So what we're doing now is kind of like the mech, a little simpler, is that Galio's HP and AD now scale off the total star levels. What this means is, let's say, for example, you have 3 cultists, all 1 star. Then what happens is you start off with the 1,000 base HP, and then each star level, in this case 3, adds 12% to that. So you end up with a 1360, is that right? Yeah, 1360 HP Galio, which is weaker than what you see on live. But when those are 2-star, you now end up with a 1720 Galio, which is stronger than what you see on live. And so as you get more cultists, scale them up, you can actually end up in a stronger situation than what you're seeing on live. And so that's kind of the general idea here. So you can see here with the example, 6 2-star cultists is 4270 HP, which is higher than the old 3800 HP. So again, this should just make Cultists feel a little bit better if you try to scale with it and stick with it, but a little less oppressive at those really early breakpoints. Fortune, as I talked about in the patch postmortem, we like the changes that we did last patch, but we just overshot it in a few places and also undershot it in a few others. So first off, 0, 1, and 2 lost streak Fortune, those are getting nerfed a bit. Fortune is the kind of thing, Fortune 3, we want you to go the hard loss streak to really benefit from it. If you're win streaking it, it shouldn't quite be as much just free gold. So we're toning that down just a little bit. So should still be a very appealing option if you get that early Fortune Tom Kench plus Annie. That's still a good thing to do. But now actually trying to chase those loss streaks might be more appealing. The other thing we did is in the 4 loss, there was a drop that allowed you to get a 5 cost. And this led to some wild screenshots where people had a 5 cost, before Krugs. Definitely not something we wanted. Sorry about that. So we've removed that. I think the earliest you can get a 5 cost now is either 6 or 7 losses. So you can still get one pretty early, but definitely not that early. That was way too early. On the flip side, though, Fortune 6 still isn't quite living up to what we want it to be. Oftentimes it's best to just play Fortune 3, cash out, and then move on. But Fortune 6 isn't quite worth the investment as much, so we're giving that another small buff, increasing the gold that you get on average, as well as lowering the 5 cost chances, though, because frankly, when you're running 6 Fortune, you don't really need extra 5 costs anyway. You need items, you need Nikos, things like that, so that should bump those up a bit. All right, Divine. Divine is a trait that basically no one was really running. Like 6 and 8 was basically non-existent. 4 was occasionally, especially with the spatula item. But it wasn't really satisfying. It was like you did a little bit extra damage, you took a little bit less damage. And the problem was at 6 and 8, you did a lot of extra damage, but you were running 6 and 8 Divine units, and they weren't very tanky and couldn't survive. You would just get blown up. Jax was basically the only one that could survive, but doing 100% extra true damage wasn't really worth running all those weaker units. So we're taking a new approach with Divine, sort of similar, same activation thing where upon attacking 6 times or dropping below 50 health, but the power is much bigger. Instead of 25% damage reduction, it's 66 damage reduction. That is a lot. That's after armor and MR and things like that. So they are going to be really hard to kill in this state. In addition, they do 50% bonus true damage. That is bigger than what 4 was. So these are big numbers. But it doesn't last forever now. It only lasts for a little bit of time. So for example, at 2 Divine, it only lasts 4 seconds and then you go back to normal. But at 6 or 8, you can last 10 seconds, 14 seconds, and that's a long time. So expect to see some Divine builds next patch. Our prediction is that Warwick carry builds might actually be a thing now with 4, 6, 8 Divine, because him being that tanky gives him a lot of time to do sustain, cast fears, things like that. But we'll see. Give Divine a try. Let us know what you think. But we think this direction will be an improvement and hopefully open up some new builds into the game. All right. Adept. Real talk, Adept still has some bigger work to do, especially with its interaction with QS. We don't think this trait really nailed it, but at the same time, on live right now, it's basically a dead trait. You should almost completely ignore it. So we're going to buff it up just a little bit to try to make that a little less true. So hopefully something like 3 Adept or even 4 Adept should feel pretty powerful, actually. And again, people are building QS, so we know it's not going to hit their carry, but can still hit the rest of the armor. And hopefully we see more in the future, some more improvements. But for now, this is what's going to have to do. Hunter. Hunter created this problem where at 2 and 3, it was a little too spiky. And at 4 and 5, it was almost like not worth running. So we're just shifting the power a little bit, nerfing it at 2, stays the same at 3, buffed at 4, buffed at 5. So a little bit of a shift there. Hopefully that's enjoying. If you want to go a full Hunter build, it should now actually be appealing and not a trap. Moonlight. Moonlight gets a new bonus. This is a new chase trait. It is 5 Moonlight. Yes, the meme is, who's the 5th Moonlight? But the real answer is you need a Chosen to do this. And if you do it, it will star up the lowest 2 Moonlight champions instead of just 1. So it is possible to have 2 4-star champions in your army at the same time. It'll be interesting to see if Moonlight builds work. I'll tell you right now, it's not Aphelios. Don't try Aphelios builds with this. But good luck. Hopefully we see some of these in the meta. And finally, Mystic. Mystic isn't really acting as much of a magic resist counter as we want, but at the same time, we also don't want Mystic to just shut out magic builds completely. So we're giving this a light buff, 5 MR at each level, and then if you go 6, you're basically saying, I don't want to take magic damage on my team, so we're buffing that one up 25. Again, some 3-star RE with 2 Jeweled Gauntlets is probably still going to kill a 6 Mystic team. That's not the point, but this should help boost your army against some of those magic damage comps. Ninja. Ninja continues to be kind of perplexing, to be honest. The 4 Ninja buff is a lot of attack damage and a lot of spell power, but it's just not enough to make people want to run Ninja builds right now. Some of this is on the back of some of the other traits, things like that, but for now we're going to buff it even further, and this is a big buff. So we're at 150 AD and spell power, so if you want to run a Ninja build, it's going to be a lot stronger now, so hopefully that feels more enjoyable. Shade. Shade is definitely the king of frustration. The aggro dropping continues to be sort of a problematic mechanic. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to probably touch this up over the next few patches, but for now, Light Touch, it is a nerf. It is just a significant nerf here. It takes 4 autos now per proc instead of 3, so it slows down how often you can drop aggro. The damage goes up, but if you math it out, the average damage per auto attack is going down. So at all levels, it is a nerf. This is just a Shade nerf. Hopefully should give you more time to target them. That being said, our goal is not eliminate Shade from the meta. So you're still going to see Shade builds win the game. That's okay. I don't want to get those screenshots of, look, Zed won, can't do the job. That's not the point. It is supposed to be weaker. So Shade should be weaker. Vanguard. 6 Vanguard gets a small buff. Wasn't really acting quite as the anti-physical. 6 Vanguard comps were actually still losing to Ash comps. Not really the goal there. But so we're getting a small buff there. And highly requested. I still think it's not really worth running, but you know, if you happen to get lucky, get a few spatulas, go ahead and run your 8 Vanguard. Grats on your 1500 armor. Enjoy. I look forward to the 8 Vanguard complaints. Can't wait. Okay, champions. Last patch we buffed Diana 1 and 2. Makes sense. This patch, just a tiny nerf to Diana 4. The scaling, as you saw, from 6 to 10 was just a little much. So we're bringing Diana down. Just 1 orb. No big deal. Elise 3 gets a buff. There's really very little reason to make a 3-star Elise. This should give her a little bit more survivability. So if you want to make her as a really strong frontliner for Cultist, you can do that. So Cultist Elise gets a little bit of a buff. Nidalee. Nidalee is kind of probably one of the least desirable units in the game right now. She doesn't really have a place in Warlord, and she's definitely the weakest sharpshooter. So we're giving her a pretty big buff so that when she does finally cast that spell, it should kind of almost feel like a Caitlyn ult. It's going to hit really hard, especially if you get that max distance one. And again, with Sharpshooter, that could bounce and actually kill maybe 2-3 targets. So Nidalee gets a pretty big buff here, which is, again, extra bonus damage per hex traveled. So that can amount to a lot if you get that perfect long-distance spear. On the 2-cost side, we already did the mana nerf to Aphelios. And this is a quality of life one, definitely the highest requested thing, which is now turrets stop firing when Aphelios is disabled. This is definitely a weird exception from a design side, so we're not super thrilled with this, but the nice thing here is it basically really does turn his cast into plus 100% attack speed. Because now if he is stunned, the turrets are stunned, and the spell is doing exactly what we intend, and that does include the GA state. If he's blinded, the turrets don't work, things like that. So now there's a little bit of counterplay. Granted, most people are running Quicksilver anyway, but at least the GA state will be a lot less frustrating. This combined with the mana nerf will definitely leave Aphelios in a weaker spot. But hopefully down the road we've got some bigger changes that we can make Aphelios into a more healthy champion long term. Jarvan. Jarvan kind of reminds me of Blitzcrank of the last set, which is like, you don't mind running Jarvan. He's definitely fine in your comp, whether it be Warlord or Keeper, and he does some okay stuff, but you never really remember him. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 3-star Jarvan, kind of like 3-star Blitz at the end of Galaxies, where he'll do a big chunk of damage. If you can get a 3-star Jarvan and then you want to do something like Jeweled Gauntlet that Jarvan, he can start one-shotting backlines, and he can have a fun, unique purpose. I don't think this is going to make Jarvan meta or anything like that, but it will open up some fun builds, things like that, and maybe make reroll Warlords a little better as well. Jax, we talked about this a bit in the postmortem, kind of overshot the buff a little bit, and combined with the Divine change, we're a little worried that Jax was going to be a bit too strong, so we're just dialing that back just a little bit. 10 more mana off the ult, so he can't ult quite as often, but should still be fairly strong. Teemo has this problem as a sharpshooter, which is that he did okay damage. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. But the problem was the damage was over time. And so oftentimes if you tried to do something cool, like get a chosen Teemo and blue buff him, you would overwrite the damage. And so you ended up not even getting the full benefit of that build. So what we're doing is we're upping the damage a lot to compensate for that fact. An itemized Teemo will still probably overwrite some things, but it won't feel quite as bad because, frankly, he's a little overtuned now. And so this should be a nice buff to sharpshooters. It should actually make you want to consider Teemo as a chosen. So hopefully we see some Teemo builds start to emerge because of this buff. On the 3-cost side, not a lot of changes here, but it is another buff to Ninja and Keepers. If you want to get a 3-star Kennen, 3-star Kennen should hurt. So expect 3-star Kennen to actually do some real damage here. 3-star Kennen is going to be scary. So, especially a 3-star Kennen with 150 spell power and a 4 ninja comp. Whew. We'll see how that goes. So, good luck with that. Okay, on the 4-cost side, Ahri. Ahri is definitely probably the most complained about champion this set. She definitely has a very powerful spell. With 2 Jeweled Gauntlets, it does a lot of damage. So we still like that identity, but we're going to try to dial it back a bit. First off, she is going to be a glass cannon, and to be a glass cannon, she needs to be glass, so she gets less HP, which gives you more opportunity to burst her down. This is also a nerf to frontline Ahri for things like Spirit, because now she'll probably take enough damage beforehand. She might not get the mana to cast, so definitely a nerf to frontline Ahri. And 2-star Ahri in particular gets her spell toned down. 50 off the base does mean that it'll scale up a lot less quicker, and you might be able to survive it with something like 4 Mystic and things like that. So Ahri just gets a bit of a nerf. Jhin was a bit of a problem at 3-star, mostly because when we designed him in Galaxies with this number, the idea was, okay, Jhin, even at 2-star, basically his 4th shot one-shots things. And so letting that number be insanely high and letting him still one-shot things, but it says 100,000 damage, like, okay, fine. No problem. The problem became with 3-star Jhin and 2, 4, even 6 sharpshooter, basically became time to delete many people on the team. So his high attack speed combined with that massive burst was just like, guess I lose, because if you didn't kill him within 2-3 seconds, he deleted 3 or 4 people off your team. So we're just toning him back down. He'll still be insanely strong. We did go with another meme here of 1, 2, 3, 4, so he's still counting to 4. But not quite as like insta-win. Same with Riven and Talon. Both of these are just tuning back their 3-star versions a little bit, try to make them a little bit more fair. And Ahri actually got the same treatment. 3-star Ahri got a 25% nerf. Generally across the board, this should put all of the 4-cost 3-stars at the same level. None of them quite auto-win, but still really strong. Morgana's a really good baseline where like 3-star Morgana's scary, but there's still ways to beat it. And that's how all of these champions should feel. So expect to see these not quite be as insta-wins. Azir. Someone said, hey, Ahri does 4,000 damage and Azir does 2,000. That's dumb. And I said, okay. And I made Azir 8888 because 8's a cool number. That's really all there is to it. And we can do this kind of stuff because, frankly, if you hit a 3-star 5-cost, they should do insane things. So, who cares? Kayn. Kayn is definitely the strongest 5-cost, and we're fine with that. Like, people are like, oh, I run Kayn, and he jumps into the backline and kills them. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me the 5-cost assassin kills your backline? Sounds like he's doing his job. So we're pretty happy with that. But there is two things that were a little off here. The first is that we're definitely seeing a giant favor towards blue buff. The blue version, you go Shadow, you get a massive chunk of damage, and you just delete things, and that swings the fight pretty hard. So we're tuning that back just a bit. And the other thing is that 1-star Kayn was having a bit more impact than we'd like. So we are tuning the base of 1-star Kayn down just a bit. Again, if you hit 2-star Kayn blue with Jeweled Gauntlet blue buff and he's killing things, cool. That's what 5 costs should do. And so if anything, we need to make other 5 costs around the same power level, not nerf Kayn into boring. So, but this should bring him down just a little bit to be healthy. Lilia, slight thing here. We've got some more work to do on Lilia, so don't consider this done. We still think she has some problems, but one thing we wanted to do was separate the power between 1-star and 2-star Lilia. So 1-star Lilia gets a tiny nerf to 3 seconds, and 2-star Lilia gets a tiny buff to 4 seconds. Not a real big deal here, but again, we've got more work to do on Lilia, so expect to see her probably in the next patch as well. And then Zilean was sort of similar. The jump from 1-star Zilean to 2-star Zilean wasn't very exciting. So we increased the targets, so he actually gets to hit 3 people with his ult instead of 2. But to that end, it used to be a total of 1,400 health to your team. Now it's 1,500 health, so the healing had to go down just a little bit. But overall, 2-star Zilean should be like, sweet, 3 people ulted. Happy days. All right, that's it for champions. Now we get to some bigger stuff on the items. So with the items, we took a look at all the items and basically went, what are the items that most people just ignore, unless they just happen to fall in their lap? Let's buff those. So you're going to see a lot of buffs here. Chalice, now 40% spell power for 3 allies. Now this should be an interesting decision. If I'm running Mage, do I want to go Death Cap on 1 person, or do I want to go Chalice on 3 people? Because that's 120 spell power for the team. There might be some really cool 3 Chalice builds now where it's like, that's a lot of spell power for a lot of different mages. So that should be a cool thing to see. Gargoyle Stoneplate. Honestly, it was a new item early on. People have kind of figured out how to get around it now. So we're buffing it back to that 15 level. Should make for some very tanky champions. So Gargoyle Stoneplate should be a little bit more exciting than just the usual Bramble Dragonclaw every time. Locket. I'll be honest, I'm nervous on this one. Locket got a big buff. Locket, as you can see, 100, 150, 225, and 300. Locket be big. You want to shield your team? Locket can do it. So enjoy. Fully expect to see Locket this meta. I would be shocked if people aren't building Locket. That's whew. Speaking of big buffs, Ludens. Ludens is getting a very large buff also. If this doesn't make Ludens playable, the item's just going to need a big rework. So the base damage goes down by 20, back to 180. But, like Static Shiv now, if the target is crowd-controlled or shielded, it does an extra 180 damage. And because the Ludens effect happens after the initial spell hit, what this basically means is anyone who's got a spell that does CC just get double damage. So, for example, a 3-mage Nami will circle 2 people and hit them for 360 each. Or we kind of think it's a meme, but 3 Ludens Sejuani will CC everyone and then hit them for 1,080 damage. So there should be some interesting Ludens options here. I think Jinx is another one that has some potential. So definitely try out some Ludens stuff. Maybe you'll find something. Maybe you don't. Should also be some cool counters to like Locket and Keeper builds, but we'll see. So give it a try. Quicksilver, basically the single most dominant item in the meta. We had buffed it initially. We're bringing it back down. Still be a good item, but should wear off and actually be counterable a little later in the fight. Should get you through the early fight, though. That's its goal. So Quicksilver gets a bit of a nerf. Shiv. This is another big buff. What we're doing to Shiv is we're lowering the base by 10, but just like Ludens in itself, if the target is shielded or crowd controlled in any way, that bonus damage goes way up. And remember, with Shiv, it's true damage. So if you're running something like a Frozen Heart in the back line and a Shiv in the front line, you can do some massive amounts of damage. Something like a Shiv Callista could be really good. We've seen it on Aphelios if you have time to ramp up. Maybe even a Vayne. But yeah, Shiv should actually be a kind of exciting item now. Zeke's similar to Chalice. No one was really excited to build Zeke's, so have 10% more attack speed. Let's see how it goes. Maybe we get some crazy triple Zeke's builds. Should be interesting. And then Zerat Portal. This one's pretty interesting. Zerat Portal, the actual minion itself, gets a pretty big buff, especially in the early game. 150 AD is a lot. But what's interesting now is the wearer of the item basically gets a taunt for the first 2 seconds of combat. So this means everyone nearby has to target that person. You can do cool things like have an assassin jump in the back line like a 4-star Diana and have everyone have to target the 4-star Diana for a while. It also makes it more likely that the Zerat person will actually be the first to die to get your benefit from Zerat. So these two things should make Zerat a little bit more of an interesting item. And actually, like if you want to run a comp that needs extra frontline, Moonlight's really good in this. Uses Zerat Portal. So cool. Finally, we're at the bug fixes. We fixed a typo in Fortune. Oops. Morellum Nomicon tooltip gets a clarification. Woohoo! Fixed the issue where the following units would show the wrong color on their spell tooltips given SP. Sweet. Tooltip clarification. This one's a pretty big buff, actually. Pike's ability now hits slightly in front of him, allowing him to hit cornered units. So Pike just got better. Kind of like Jarvan. So expect to see more Pike. Pike can actually do some cool stuff now. Buff to cultists, buff to assassins. Neat. Fixed, this one's big. Fixed a rare issue where Strange Chosen could appear in the shop, but buying them would give you a 1-star copy of a different unit. Many people reported this. It's fixed. Hooray! Kayn no longer casts if there's no enemies in range he could hit. He'll save his mana and walk into them. Set can no longer cast Showstopper on an enemy set who is out of combat due to the boss. And there were a few bugs within the Fortune loot tables that were just a little higher or lower than intended. So we got those cleared up and fixed. Thanks, Leduc, for the help with that. So, pretty big 10.21 patch. Should change the meta quite a bit. Should be pretty interesting. Hopefully makes more builds viable. Hopefully makes a more dynamic meta. And again, I want to clarify, the goal here is that all the stuff that's working should still be working. You should still see things like Spirit Shade Zed and Elderwood Vigar, but they should be a little less prominent and more things should exist to be able to combat them, hopefully on an equal level. So that is the goal. Hopefully we nail that. All right, that's going to do it for me from now. That's it for patch 10.21. As always, let us know how we're doing. Keep the feedback coming. We love it. On behalf of everyone on the team, thank you for playing Fates. Until next time, take it easy.